Hello, how are you? By popular request, today I've picked out my favorite probiotics and prebiotics. You know, they're super important for gut health. And when we think about gut health, we're not just talking about how the intestines work, being able to have regular bowel movements, preventing constipation. We're also talking about immunity, metabolism, inflammation, and even mental health. First, I'm going to tell you the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic, how to add them to your daily routine, and which ones are the best. You're going to love this video. Stay until the end because you won't want to miss it. Before we start, I want to ask if you have the habit of consuming prebiotics or probiotics if that's something you think about. I'd love to see your comment. Remember to like the video. That's super important to me. It shows YouTube that you support the channel, trust my content, and it also helps this video reach more people who need it. There was a time when the gut was only associated with whether or not you could have regular bowel movements. We know that practically 70% of our immune system is in the gut, and about 90% of serotonin, that neurotransmitter, the hormone linked to well-being and good mood, is produced right there in our gut, then goes into the bloodstream and reaches our brain. So nowadays, we already know the extremely important role our gut plays in many areas of our body, health, and well-being. So, when this system in our gut, the bacteria that live there, become imbalanced, we have what we call dysbiosis. And then symptoms can appear, such as gas, abdominal bloating, constipation, or diarrhea, depending on the person, food intolerances, and a low-grade chronic inflammation that worsens our body in a more systemic way. Many people don't understand why there's so much talk these days about this issue of dysbiosis, why the microbiota in our gut has been getting so unhealthy lately. Because as I told you, we have many bacteria and microorganisms that live in us. When we think about our body, we have a symbiotic process, not just in the gut, but also on our skin. We have bacteria in the urinary tract, in the genital tract, so our body is populated by thousands, millions of microorganisms that we don't see every day. And nowadays, this can be changing, first because of the frequent use of antibiotics by many people. There are many people who take antibiotics without a doctor's prescription, without any guidance. Even though nowadays we have greater control over this, it has been happening for decades, so we still suffer as a population. Antacids that people use for long periods can also harm the gut microbiome, because we know that the stomach naturally has a more acidic pH precisely to help inactivate viruses, bacteria, and other microorganisms that shouldn't pass beyond that point, acting as an important protective barrier. If you change this pH to treat heartburn or reflux for a very long time and without medical supervision, this can also end up harming your body, especially in terms of promoting dysbiosis and altering the balance of your gut microbiome. Chronic stress can hinder the growth of good bacteria. A diet low in fiber and high in sugar, and you'll understand this better in a moment, tends to favor the growth of harmful bacteria because these bad bugs thrive on sugar while they don't do as well when you consume plenty of fiber. So when your diet is lacking in this regard, it's the perfect meal for them. And of course, also the excess of ultra-processed foods, which basically have all of that. Little fiber, lots of sugar, colorants, preservatives, acidifiers, things our gut doesn't even really recognize as food. So this reduces the diversity of these beneficial microorganisms and can contribute to a worsening of intestinal and digestive conditions overall. First, let me quickly explain the difference between prebiotics and probiotics. Prebiotics are like the food for these beneficial bacteria and yeasts. So, they are fibers that we don't digest and that serve as food for this microbiota. So, usually, good sources of prebiotics are foods that are rich in fiber. If you think about that, you're already halfway there. Foods that are rich in soluble fiber, these are the foods that our gut microbiota likes the most. So, garlic, onion, leek, which are very rich in inulin, asparagus, artichoke, leafy greens, all leafy vegetables are rich in fiber. Less ripe bananas also have a good amount of fiber, as do kiwis, apples, all the fruits you can eat with the peel, pears, guavas, legumes like beans, chickpeas, lentils, peas, and whole grains themselves. In other words, all foods that are rich in fiber end up having a large amount of soluble fiber. And these soluble fibers end up producing substances like short-chain fatty acids, which strengthen the intestinal wall. So they prevent that leakage of nutrients and even microorganisms that can pass through increased intestinal permeability, which we don't want. What we want is for there to be selectivity in this intestinal membrane so that the body can recognize, hey, this can pass, this cannot. They help reduce inflammation in the intestine and improve the overall functioning of the intestine. They stimulate digestion, help you have regular bowel movements, and as a result, your intestinal health improves significantly. Still talking about prebiotics, there's a really cool tip I can share with you here, which is about resistant starch. Several scientific studies have already confirmed that when we cook a carbohydrate, cool it down, and then heat it up again, the starch in that carbohydrate becomes resistant starch, which ends up being more beneficial for us. So if you cook the rice, cool it down, then reheat it to eat, whether it's pasta, potatoes, cassava, any type of carbohydrate or starch, if you cool it after cooking and then reheat it, it will be more beneficial for your gut health. Now, speaking of probiotics, these are, in fact, the beneficial microorganisms, good yeasts and bacteria that are favorable for our gut. And usually they are present in fermented foods. Why is that? Because when we ferment a food, we allow the bacteria and yeasts that are naturally present to feed on the sugars in that food, and then they grow and multiply. So any fermented food that hasn't been pasteurized is usually a good quality probiotic food. For example, homemade yogurt is fermented milk. Kefir is also fermented milk, but by a different type of microorganism, so they're two different types of yogurt. Kefir ends up being more powerful in terms of the microbiota present, but both yogurt and kefir are good equivalents, in the sense that if you only have one or the other, that's perfectly fine. I already have videos here on the channel talking about the difference between the two and how to make them at home. There's a playlist here about probiotics. I'll leave it down below in the description for you, but there are other foods you can ferment at home. Apple, oats, cabbage, pickles, onion. I have ginger. I have many probiotic recipes that I've already made here on the channel. Super affordable. Because when we think of probiotics, you think about buying medicine from the pharmacy. You don't need to. If you consume them regularly in your daily life, you won't get to the point where you need to use probiotic medication to address this issue, this deficiency, this dysbiosis that you have. So depending on your taste, the most affordable foods, the ones most compatible with the region where you live, with the season of the year, you can ferment various types of different foods to add to your daily routine. Fermenting a food is when you take a culture of bacteria and yeasts and add it to another food at room temperature. This is a very important point. For example, bread is fermented. This example of bread is very good for helping you understand the difference. Bread, usually when we make bread, even bakery bread, you take baker's yeast and add it to wheat flour, oat flour, whatever flour you're using. You let it sit and wait, it ferments, rises, and forms those bubbles. Because when the bacteria consume that starch, that carbohydrate, they actually produce carbon dioxide. That makes it fluffy, and then you bake it. When you bake it, you kill the bacteria. So bread can't be considered a fermented food, even though it was fermented, because you put it in the oven and killed the bacteria, you inactivated the bacteria. So it doesn't work as a fermented food. Just like a supermarket yogurt that doesn't contain live cultures can't be considered a probiotic or a fermented food. It is fermented, but it's not a probiotic at that point, because the food has often been pasteurized. The pasteurization process is done to ensure shelf life, so it doesn't spoil. So they raise it to a very high temperature and then cool it down. And this pasteurization ends up inactivating those beneficial bacteria and yeasts as well. So you have two options. Either you check the label to make sure it contains live cultures, or you make it at home. Because at home, you won't pasteurize it. You'll take your yogurt, you'll make it, you'll prepare it. For example, you'll mix a small container of yogurt with 4 cups of warm milk. Mix it, put it into small containers, wait a day or a day and a half for it to ferment, to curdle, so the consistency changes, and then place it in the refrigerator. You shouldn't heat it to a very high temperature and then cool it down afterward. So that way you can actually have live cultures there to help nourish and support your gut health more effectively. Not every food needs you to add more of itself to make it fermented. For example, if you take oats and add water to them, you can make a fermented oat product. The most important thing about fermentation is controlling the time, the temperature, and avoiding the growth of harmful bacteria. That's why we need to be very hygienic when making fermented foods at home. Usually we sterilize everything, boil the jars and spoons, and use a dish towel reserved just for this purpose, which you clean thoroughly and also boil to prevent contamination. I've already shared many videos here about different probiotics, like making fermented cabbage, making fermented onions, and other similar preparations. So many that I can't even remember. There are a lot that I've already made here on the channel. Chia, where we can tell it's fermented because bubbles form in the food and it gets a slight smell of bread yeast. And then you can see that it is fermented. If you want to learn from scratch how to ferment various foods, take a look at this playlist I have here. You're going to love it. There are foods that aren't exactly fermented, but can still improve gut health. Like extra virgin olive oil, which stimulates the growth of beneficial bacteria. It's not the bacteria itself, nor is it fiber, the prebiotic, but it can help facilitate the growth of good bacteria. Green tea contains polyphenols with a prebiotic effect. Propolis can modulate inflammation and the microbiota itself. So all of this can be naturally incorporated into your daily diet to help promote a healthier gut environment and support overall intestinal function more effectively over time. Now, just as there are foods that help, there are also foods that make things worse and get in the way. Sugar is terrible for our gut because it leads to the growth of bad bacteria. It ferments, causes gas, and the good bacteria don't like sugar that much. They prefer fiber. Refined vegetable oils, ultra-processed foods, and excessive alcohol consumption also worsen the growth of beneficial bacteria. So, if you eat a diet where you include a prebiotic and a probiotic, but every day you also drink alcohol and consume a lot of sugar, you may not really be improving your dysbiosis. So, it's always a broader, more holistic issue that depends on your overall lifestyle. It's about taking care of your eating habits, your diet, your lifestyle as a whole, so that you can get the beneficial effects. Tell me down below then if you have the habit of consuming prebiotics or probiotics in your daily life. Let me tell you in advance that out of all the prebiotics and probiotics, my favorites are, when it comes to probiotics, kefir, which I actually consume almost every day. And for prebiotics, it's chia. I love fermented chia. Chia is very easy for us to add to our daily routine, and it has a very neutral flavor, and it's a really great option. The prebiotic from chia, even without fermenting it, it can be the chia itself because of its high amount of soluble fiber, or you can even ferment the chia. By making it both a prebiotic and a probiotic in a single food, it can be a really cool option. Tell me what you usually consume on a daily basis to improve your gut health. I would love to see your comment. Remember to like the video, that really helps me a lot, and share it with anyone who would enjoy it or who needs this information. Let's work together to expand this chain of kindness. That's what I want here with the channel. See you next time. Bye.